Okay, so we are continuing in the book of Bamidbar. We're going to end the book of Bamidbar with this week's Torah reading. We're catching up with the same in Israel as we are in outside of Israel. So we're finishing the book of Numbers. We're finishing the travails, the walking through, the journey through the desert. And this week's Torah portion, as I said, is a double portion. So the first one is called Mattot, and the second one is called Masei. So let's start with just reading the beginning of Mattot. Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the thing that Hashem has commanded. If a man takes a vow to Hashem or swears an oath to establish a prohibition upon himself, he shall not desecrate his word. According to whatever comes from his mouth shall he do." And what we learn from this again and again and again in the Torah, we are exhorted to use our speech well, that our speech has the power to create. Go back to the Genesis, the creation of the world. God creates the world using davar, using words. They're the building block for the world. And again, we don't really understand what that means, but we do know that in the Torah it says God said, "Let there be light." God said, and through the saying, created reality. And for us to understand what that means for our own lives, that our words are so powerful that we shouldn't be flippant with our words. We should be, and again, like, we can know this intellectually, and we probably all know how important our words are, especially in this day and age where everything's broadcast to everybody so easily, and people can say the wrong thing and you're out. And perhaps that's bringing to the fore the importance of our words. But I really think that it enjoins us to review this topic of how powerful our words are, because it does come up in this week's Torah portion, but it's also so rampant throughout the Torah. If you look in the book of Bamidbar, where we had the episode of the spies. So the spies came back with an evil report, and through their language, through their words, they were able to create frenzy and anxiety in the people, such that they didn't want to go into the land of Israel. It put them into a tailspin of negativity. So the spies is an example of using language and creating a reality that didn't have to be created. It wasn't real. It was the imagination or the fears of the spies coming back and then spreading that to the people and creating anxiety, etc. over there. We also have the episode in the book of Bamidbar and the book of Numbers. We have Korach, who we talked about, used his language to incite rebellion against Moses and Aaron and their leadership. We have 2 weeks ago, we had the Torah portion of Bilam, trying to curse the Jewish people with his words. So again, the power of words, and how words are amazing. They create us into human beings, which is above the animal kingdom. There's no other animal that has the capacity for language and communication that we do, that our language takes the thoughts and our ideas and our transcendent realities and tries to bring it down and put it out into the world in a way that no other creature can do. We're created in the image of God, and we have the capacity to create worlds through our language. So what do words do? They describe things, they communicate things. Your inner heart can be communicated, your true feelings, your love, etc. They can create, they can categorize, they can explain things, they can translate your experience of the world into a language so we can communicate that to others. And they are, in this week's Torah portion, used to bind us to something. So I'm going to give a few examples of ways in which our words literally transform a reality. When a person gets married, when people get married, they go to the chuppah not married, by words, by the covenant that they make with each other. They've changed their reality, and they've turned themselves into a married couple. Again, the power of words to transform single people into married people. And that transformation changes their status, all with words. We can add on to Shabbat. Shabbat is this holy bubble in time, but we can choose to expand it out. We can bring Shabbat in early. We can light the Shabbat candles, make the blessing on the candles brings in Shabbat. We can bring it in early. We can make Shabbat longer. We can not acknowledge, we cannot say the words of transitioning from the holy day to the mundane day, to the other day, into after Shabbos. We can hold it. We can hold it longer by not acknowledging that the status has changed with our words. We can expand the land, the city of Israel. Jerusalem. We can expand the city of Jerusalem. We can make that a bigger space. There's a lot of things that we can do with our words. We can pledge, which we do often, to give tzedakah, to give charity, to give money, to do something. And what the Torah is teaching us is be careful with your vows, with your pledges, with your oaths. You are literally transforming sometimes an object, but you're also transforming yourself. And it's very dangerous. So we don't want to do it. We don't want to make a promise, make a commitment, and then not follow through on it. So that's a very important piece of who we want to be, or we're enjoined to be, is people who keep our word. That our word is tied up with who we are. And if we are not trustworthy and we are not faithful to our word, then we're not living up to our highest potential. So there's a great emphasis paid to keeping our promises, to be people, to be a person who keeps our promise. So, and you might hear people in the Orthodox world, they use this word bli neder, like I'll come to your house, or I'll do such and such, bli neder, without a vow. I don't want it to be a vow. I don't want this to be something I'm absolutely bound to in case I don't do it. So I'll make a quote unquote a promise, a pledge, an oath, that I'll do something, but I don't want it to be binding. So bli neder, without actually making an oath, I plan to do this. And sometimes people are very careful with their words, and they'll say, I plan to do such and such, instead of I will do such and such, in case they actually don't do it. So that's, again, language, how important language is. I heard something from Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg today, who spoke about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He has an article, I think, called something about how you use your words, about how he used his words. And he cited a study done about how words can actually change your brain, how inside your brain can be changed by the words that you use. That if you use pessimistic, negative language, that kind of builds anxiety in us, almost without us knowing it. Like it becomes part and parcel of who you are. And flip it around and say, okay, I'm going to use, or I want to use, positive language, because I understand that it will transform me. I will become a more positive person by the language that I use. I'm going to really working on my language. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe apparently wouldn't use the word for like a deadline. He wouldn't use the word deadline because it has the word dead in it. So he would say, I have a due date. Or he wouldn't say the word retreat because it had something to do with like pulling back. It's not a retreat. I'm not going on a retreat. I'm going on a conference. He didn't like the word undertaking because it had this connotation of being under. He didn't like the word outreach because it's like you're reaching out, almost to say the importance of our language, even if we don't recognize it, that it plays a role in shaping who we are. So not only do we create realities with our words, what's the story I tell myself, like how real is my reality? It's as real as the language that I speak, but I also can affect my brain by my language. So, I think this is an amazing teaching, and it's something I want to take out of this is, okay, I'm going to really try to use positive language. Apparently the Lubavitcher Rebbe wouldn't speak about the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death. He would say the opposite of the angel of life, and he wouldn't use that word. So again, it's an extreme, but it brings home the point of how absolutely important our words are, how they create realities, how they can use to build and to construct and to elevate and to enrich and to build up people, but they can also bring down and they can also destroy. And how we can kill with words. We can embarrass people, which is akin to killing people by embarrassing people. And so the Torah portion is telling us, be careful with your words, to the point that don't issue a vow. Go to Yom Kippur. What do we do at the beginning of Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. We go there to wipe ourselves clean. And the first thing that we talk about is vows. Kol nidre. We talk about all our vows, all the things we may have said with our words. Again, focusing us we're not always so focused on it, but to refocus ourselves at the beginning of Yom Kippur on our words and how important our words are, so that any vow I made, I want to annul that vow. Built into the system, God has allowed us to annul our vows. So if we do mistakenly make a vow that we don't follow through on, that we create a reality that actually doesn't come to be, then we make a promise that we don't fulfill, we have built into the system an ability to annul that, to reverse it, so it doesn't kind of stain us, kol nidre. So we want to be people who are true to our words. We want to be people where what we say means something. They're very important. That creates a reality. That changes the nature of an object. We can have wine, which we drink during the week, and we can have wine that we have on Shabbat. And when we elevate it and we say kiddush over it with our mouth, we say certain words over it, we make a blessing over it, we elevate it, it becomes holy, it becomes sacred, and we have the capacity with our mouths to make something sacred. There's a teaching about, well, wouldn't it be better if we had two mouths? We have a mouth to speak sacred words, we have a mouth to say prayers with, we have a mouth to bless people with. That should be one mouth, and we should have another mouth for everything else, for eating and for common talk. I said, no, you have one mouth, and try to use that mouth which is a point of connection, which is something connects us to our thoughts, to our ideas, to something transcendent. Use the mouth that has the capacity to build and to create. Let's use that and be mindful of it, because words change our mind. Words create reality, and let's not waste them. They really, really, really matter. So I think underlying a lot of this week's Torah portion is the notion that things matter. Words matter. Our intentions matter. Where we go, what we do matter. That things really, really matter. So, and our Torah was accepted with words. What did we do when we accepted the Torah? It was with our words. Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll do it and we'll understand it. We want to accept it. We did it with our words. We accepted. We took a covenant of a relationship with God with words. We created a covenant. We became the Jewish people through our words. Amazing capacity to be who we want to be through how we speak. So let's just hold that thought for a minute and hold on to that. There's an amazing medrash that says that when a baby is in utero, so there's a medrash that says we're all curled up, and the vessels that are closed open up at birth, but they're all, we have everything we need in utero, that the mother is providing everything, and then the baby is completely taken care of and is in a nurturing place. And it says in the medrash that there's a candle that lights up above the baby's head, and it allows the baby to see from one end of the universe to another. And there's an angel in utero, an angel that teaches each child all of the wisdom of the world. All of the Torah gets taught to us, and we perhaps all know this medrash that when we get born, we get slapped on this part here, the philtrum, we get slapped on that, and the Torah, does it get forgotten? Does it go in? And the rest of our life is to reveal that, to understand that, to know that again. But there's another teaching, continuing with that medrash, that before birth we utter a vow. We make a vow. That there's a vow that we make that we will be righteous people and not wicked people. What kind of person will you be? God says to us before we're born, make a vow that you'll be righteous and not wicked. And we make that vow in utero, apparently, according to the Medrash. But what it says is that God has faith in us, that every single person has the capacity to rise to their higher selves, to be their best person, to be righteous, that we have the ability to be righteous. And it goes on to say that the whole world, that we make this vow to be righteous and not wicked. And if the whole world calls you righteous, you must see yourself as wicked. Which is an interesting teaching. Don't get too full of yourself. We're people, and we're going to mess up, and we're going to continue to mess up. I remember talking to somebody once, and she was entering into a very important job. It was going to be a great job for her, and we were talking, and I said to her, maybe I shouldn't have said this, but I said, I wonder how you're going to stay in that job and not get full of yourself and not become arrogant. Maybe I didn't say it in those words, but the concept is, how do we stay grounded, especially if you have a very lofty job and people are very, adoring of you? How do you stay grounded? And she said, I have children for that. You have children for that. But this is another teaching that tells to set her straight. You're not so high and mighty. But I think that this idea that even when we maybe are lifted up in the eyes of others, and others may see us as righteous, or we may teach ourselves in our minds that we're righteous, which many of us are trying, that there's a desire to be righteous, right? We all want to be good people. But if you think of yourself as a good person, then you're not going to keep striving. So this Medrash is telling us, even if the whole world thinks you're righteous and calls you righteous, don't believe them. You have to see yourself as wicked, and maybe that's a little extreme, but see yourself as flawed, see yourself as human, and self-love involved here, but also the capacity to keep moving. Don't stop. Like, okay, I'm in this position and I have adoration and I have people who give me affirmation, but I have a long way to go. There's a long way to go. So we're going to talk there about the midah, about the character trait of humility, and recognizing that we're all human and we're all on a journey and we all have work to do. And we're going to talk about journeys as we continue through this double parsha. But the idea that we have a vow and that it's so serious. We spoke. I wanted to bring out how important a vow is and why we don't make vows flippantly. And when we do, we have kol nidre, or we have other means to annul our vows because they are so sacred. And we don't want to make a vow and a promise that we're not going to fulfill because that's not reaching up to our highest potential. So we have a desire for us to grow, but we don't want to be beholden to something that we can't hold up to. Yet, in utero, we make a vow, maybe an unconscious vow, maybe a vow from our soul that says that we're going to be righteous and we're not going to be wicked. So God has a belief in us, a faith in us, that we can reach that. We can do that. We can all be good. We can all reach to that potential. So let's maybe see that as a positive thing when we talk about the Rebbe who wants to use positive words, only positive words. Like, we don't want to talk about retreat. We don't want to talk about undertaking something because it has this word of under, and we don't want to talk about deadlines because they're negative. So don't take out the negative talk. Instead of saying negative things, always like twist it around and use the positive, So I think there's a really, really valuable lesson to be taken, again, to just focus for a minute on the importance of our words and how words matter and how we can build and how we can destroy. And in America today, we have a lot of words being bantered around that maybe shouldn't be so public and should be held in and should be worked on. So anyway, so that's the first part of our Torah portion, is about words. Next part of the Torah portion talks about the war against the Midianites. So God tells Moses, you have to fight off the Midianites. Remember the Midianites from last week's Torah portion. Last week's Torah portion was Pinchas, where Pinchas, he single-handedly, our zealot, he stands up for God. He is representative of God's in the world, and he kills this Jewish headsman, tribal head, who is having relations with a Midianite woman. The Midianite woman is somebody who is pulling, all these Midianite women are pulling the Jewish men and the Jewish people away from God and bringing them to idolatry. And so we spoke last week about Pinchas, who stabs the two in their union, in their intimate act, such that the vengeance of God is brought into the world, and the plague stops, and everybody stops, and we can start again, so to speak. But that happened last week. We have the Midianites. The Midianites were the people who were trying to pull the Jewish people away from God. They were trying to get the people to commit idolatry with their god Bel Pa'or, and we talked about that last week. So they're still around. So God says to Moses, you have to kill them off. It's the end. These are evil people. It's a battle of a good against bad. It's a battle of evil against holiness. It's a battle against it's a battle that you, Moses, have to be part of. But he isn't actually one who goes to war against the Midianites, because if you remember, the father-in-law of Moses is Jethro, who is from Midian. So when Moses was fleeing from Egypt, he goes to Midian. So there's a gratitude that Moses has for his father-in-law, and so he can't be part of that war. But there's a war that has to be fought against the Midianites, because the Midianites represent evil. and that has to be vanquished, that has to be obliterated. We have to get rid of evil, like we have to get rid of the Amalekites. We have to get rid of evil. Evil has to be purged from our midst. And so we are enjoined in this week's Torah portion to destroy the Midianites. However, it's also linked to the death of Moses. God says that when the Midianites are vanquished, when you destroy the Midianites, when you destroy evil, then that will be the end of your mission, Moses. You will now be gathered unto your people. I will kiss you with this kiss that will create a separation of your soul. You will be brought up into the higher realms. You will die. And that's linked to the war and the vanquishing and the obliteration of the evil of the Midianites. Moses' death is linked to the obliteration of evil. So you would think that Moses might be a little bit hesitant to go to war against the Midianites. It's going to be the end of his life, but he isn't. It's about fulfilling his mission. It's not about him. It's not about Moses. Moses is not running his show, leading his journey, doing it for his own means. He's doing everything L'Shem Shemayim, is God in mind. God says you need to do this, and when you've done this, your mission will be over. That is the end of your job in this world. You're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael. We spoke about that before. And you will be gathered unto the people when evil is destroyed by obliterating the Midianites. So this is something that Moses full force, no, he doesn't go to war, but he sends the rest of the nation, Joshua, Pinchas, going to kill the Midianites. And that is something that we read about in this week's Torah portion. He doesn't hesitate, even though it's going to lead to his death, he doesn't hesitate to do the word of God. It's a battle of evil against good. It's going to fight this war, and they come back from war. And the wording suggests that they came back from war. They did what they went into the war to do. They got rid of the Midianites and they collected the spoils of war, and we talk about that. And they came back to war. They didn't come back from war. Is the letter in the wording in the Torah, meaning that there's outward forces that take us off track. There's evil outside we have to battle against. But we're not ever done. There's always an inner battle. There's a battle on the outside and there's a battle on the inside. So we can be battling against the forces of evil out there in the world, and we're going to do that, and we're going to fight as hard as we can. But then when we come back and we're victorious over that battle, don't rest on your laurels, says God, because there's more wars to be fought. This is not a world of rest. This is not a world of tranquility. We might take our time to go sit on the beach, which we all should do sometimes. I highly recommend it. However, that's not our whole life, lying on a beach. Lying on a beach gives us the fortitude, gives us the energy, gives us the koyach, the strength to keep fighting the battles. And the battles sometimes are outside and sometimes the battles are inside. I have to fight my inner inclinations. I have to fight the things that take me away from doing the right thing. I have to fight those forces. Who is strong, says our Ethics of the Father? He who is in control of himself. He who can subdue his negative inclinations. If you have an inclination to do something that is going to take you away, that isn't a good thing to do, fight that. Work on it. Use the right words. I remember once there was this amazing teacher who came. We used to work in a school for children who were having a very hard lives. And there was one man who came every year, and basically his lesson was, he was somebody who had very hard times, and he built himself up. But he said the way I built themselves up was with my thoughts. When I had a negative thought, he said, I would punch it out. I would push that thought out, look at myself in the mirror, and I'd say, that's not a thought I want to have. And he would punch it out, and he would replace it with a positive thought. So interesting. Maybe we can even link that back to the beginning of the Parsha about words and say, oh, when I have a thought that's negative, I'm going to punch it out by speaking positive. If I speak positively, I will create positivity in my brain. I will become that positivity, but I will also win the battles, the inner battles of being pulled away. I want to be pulled towards the light, not away from the light. I want to go towards the promised land. I want to go towards a relationship with God. I want to go towards connection and love. I want to go that direction, not that direction. So use your words well, not just because we have a commitment to our word and because we want to we want to not use our words flippantly, but because the reality of what we create, that we create a reality that can fight off negativity. We can create a reality that can fight negativity both internally and externally. So when the Jews come back from having killed off the Midianites, they bring all their spoils with them. They bring all this wealth back with them. So interesting, they bring it all back with them. And this is where we learn about toiveling, about taking metals and glass and bringing it to a mikveh. So if an object, an eating utensil, metal or glass, needs to go into a mikveh before we can use it. What's that about? And perhaps it's about one of the reasons. Obviously there's lots and lots of different reasons, but what does a mikveh do? Just like our words create reality, a mikveh also creates reality. When we go into a mikveh as a non-Jew converting to a Jew, you come out as a Jew. Your intention to go into the mikveh, again, it's not just swimming in the ocean. You have an intention. You have, again, thoughts and words that create a new reality. You go into the mikveh and you come out, you're Jewish. You've changed your status. You've become a different person. It's unbelievable. When you put your metal and glassware, eating utensils and glasses, and you put them into a mikveh, they come out new. They come out holy. They come out sacred. They come out so that it elevates our eating. Again, we're looking to rise up to a higher level. We're looking to be holy. We're looking to be connected to God. God says, put these vessels into the mikveh. Create something holy. Make them holy. Make a blessing over them. Make them something that you then eat out of with an intention to be sacred, to be holy. It's really built into our system, that this God's system of the world, that we have the capacity to change things through our nedarim, through our vows, through our oaths, through our speech. We create reality, and we change reality. We change the reality of a spoon and a glass by putting it into the mikveh, making a blessing on it. And okay, now I've elevated it. Now I've made it into something that is sacred and holy. So our language can not only change us, but it can change objects. It's great. It's amazing. All right. So we've got the idea of toiveling, immersing in the mikveh, and let's keep going because we've got a lot to cover and we're halfway through our time. So the next part is we're about to enter into the Jewish homeland, the promised land. We're poised on the edge. Reuven and Gad, these two tribes of Reuven and Gad. Let's see if I can read it inside. The children of Reuven and the children of Gad had abundant livestock, very great. Okay, so we're poised on the land. We're going into the land. Moses isn't going in, but the Jewish people, all of the tribes, 12 tribes going into the land of Israel, and they're going to claim it, and they're going to be given portions. Remember, we talked about the daughters of Slachad last week and how they didn't have a portion because their father had died, and they argued. They brought their case towards Moses, took it to God. God says, you're right, give them a portion. They get a portion. They actually reappear in this week's Torah portion. But we're going to divvy up the land. Here they are, poised. We're year 40. We're about to go in. Reuven and Gad had abundant livestock, apparently from the war of Midian. They saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and he said, behold, it was a place for livestock. The children of Gad and the children of Reuven came and said to Moses, to Eleazar the Cohen, and to the leaders of the assembly, saying, that they wanted this land. They wanted the land on the Transjordan, on the east of the land of Israel. They actually didn't want to go into the land. The tribes of Gad and Reuven wanted the lush pastoral land of the Transjordan. They actually didn't want to go into Israel. They wanted to stay over here where the land was good for their flocks. Very interesting. And so they go to Moses and they said, that's what we want to do. They didn't even go in the land and see the land yet. Okay, so there, on some level, there's some commentary about making a decision before you have all your information in front of you. They saw the beautiful pastures of the Transjordan, and they said, we don't need to go any further. We're happy here. Perhaps we can learn from that. The lesson that maybe when you ask for something, you might want to know everything about everything before, if as much as you can, before you ask for something. Like, okay, well, you don't know actually what the land of Israel. Oops. Sorry about that. You don't actually know Hopefully everybody's still there. Give me a thumbs up if you are. The pastoral land, they didn't even go into the land of Israel and said that we want this land. So maybe a rash decision. So perhaps sometimes we have to be more cautious with our decisions, how we make decisions, what we ask for till we know perhaps a little bit more. But that's one. The other thing is that it's a little bit like the language of the spies. The spies said, we don't want to go into the land. It's too much for us. We'll just stay here in the desert where it's spiritual and holy with God. And perhaps Moses is being reminded of that with the spies when Gad and Reuven say, we want to stay over here in the Transjordan. And Moses says, but wait a minute, let's have a conversation about this. Two things. One is, we are all, as a nation, going into the land of Israel. Moses obviously not going in, but Joshua as the leader is going to take the Jewish people in, and it's going to involve fighting and winning over the land. There's going to be battles that have to be fought to take over the land. And Gad and Reuven saying, we want to stay over here. We don't want to go into the land. And Moses saying, you can't do that. You have to fight with the people. Your destiny is part of the Jewish people. So he does a deal with them, so to speak. He kind of like understands maybe I understand that the land is good here for your cattle. However, you are part of the Jewish people and you have to fight with the Jewish people. So come with us into the land, fight with the Jewish people, get the land. And they say, great, well, we're happy to do that. We want to be part of we want to fight with the Jewish people. We believe in the Jewish people. We are part of the Jewish people as much as we want the land over there. We'll come in with you, says Gad and Reuven. We'll come in with you. We'll actually go in the front of the line. We'll fight with you, but at the front even. We'll stay with you until all the land is apportioned and it's all distributed. And then we'll go back to the Transjordan where it's good for our flocks. But what's also interesting is that Gad and Reuven say, we want to... And the order is very important here. We want to make pens for our flocks and cities for our children. And it's the order that they're also criticized for saying. We're going to take care of our animals and then we're going to take care of our children. And Moses says, no, it's the other way round. You're going to take care of your children. What's more important, your children or your animals? And the way that they phrased, again, language, what was Gad and Reuven saying? They were saying, we're going to take care of our animals and we're going to take care of our children. Perhaps in the back, that's not quite the right order. Say that what you want, right? So you might be more focused on materialism and acquisition of wealth and your animals that are going to be a sign of your wealth. You might be more focused on that. Shift your language, put the people first. Even if it's not first, put it first and make it first and kind of like switch the language. So when Gad and Reuven speak about taking care of their animals before taking care of the people, they're faulted for that. So there's a few things going on here. So Gad and Reuven come to Moses. They haven't seen the land yet and they want this land. Moses says, but you got to come with us. You got to, your destiny is part of the Jewish people. Come with us, fight with the Jewish people and Joshua. That's really, really important that you have a stake in us all as together as one nation, that you fight with us together. And we can talk about what that means even nowadays where we have the Jewish people in Israel, we have Israeli soldiers fighting for the Jewish nation and Jewish people outside of Israel who don't support the army, don't support the country. Perhaps there's a parallel there. I'm not going to go anywhere into politics, but I'm going to speak about what it means when we are a divided nation, and we are a divided nation, and we don't want to be a divided nation, and Moses doesn't want this nation to be divided. So when Gad and Reuven say, I'm going to stay over here, and Moses says, but you're part of the Jewish people, you have to fight with the Jewish people, not just give money to the Jewish people, and not just in your words, but now in your actions, you have to come into the land, go into the land with the people, and you have to fight, and you have to help them apportion the land, which they do, and then they come back. And that's 14 years before they come back. It's not like they just went in for a couple of weeks and came back. Their commitment, Gad and Reuven, yes, they wanted this land and they got that land and it was good for their flocks, etc. And they did have to realign their values. So it wasn't about money first and then people, right? So that was something that they were faulted for. However, I did read some other commentators that suggested that if the flocks are in good pastoral land, and not in the land of Israel where we're growing crops, etc., that the animals wouldn't be eating the crops, that perhaps there won't be enough land in the land of Israel, and that taking all this livestock into Israel would then cause them to encroach upon the cropland. So perhaps in the minds of Gad and Reuven, they said, look, it's better for the flocks over here, so we don't encroach on the agricultural land in Israel. That's one idea. Another idea is that if we have our flocks in a place which is really easy to take care of our animals, they have plenty of water and they have plenty of grass and whatever animals need. If they have that, then we'll have more time on our hands to learn Torah. So we're going to be able to do both. We can do our livelihood, we can take care of ourselves physically in order to free ourselves up to work on our spirituality. And so that was something that they also, perhaps some of the commentators suggest, was behind their motivation for saying we want to be on the Transjordan. Okay, so they and what's also interesting is when Moses says, wait, I have to think about this idea of you being on the Transjordan. It says in the Torah that Gad and Reuven approached Moses, came close. There's a closeness. We're not about battling. We're not about separation. We're not about pulling people apart. Like I'm arguing, I want this and you want that and da-da-da-da-da. It's like they approached each other. They came together. Let's have a conversation. What does this really mean? I see that you want this land. Let's work it out. Blah, blah, blah. And then to go back to the people, because part of what we learn from this is a concept that we have called Morit Ayin, where there's a perception that somebody is doing something wrong. So when Gad and Reuven say, we don't want to go into the land, it smacks of the spies who didn't want to go into the land. They were fearful. Maybe they didn't think God was with them. Maybe they didn't think they could take over. And so it could lead the people, again, as it did with the spies, into a very negative place and into a place where they're like all a flurry and they're all anxious and they cry, and it leads to, a lot of things in the future that happened on that night. Tisha B'Av is coming up. We'll talk about that. But the power of speech about the land. So we had the spies saying it, and now we've got Gad and Reuven saying, I don't want to go into the land, I want to stay here. And the perception that it could have for the other people. We need to be above reproach. And this concept of how it looks to everybody else, even though Moses trusted them and understood what they want, and Gad and Reuven come close and they have a conversation with Moses. But we have to be above suspicion across the board. And I think this is such a powerful concept of how we are perceived by other people. I might know in my mind that it's no problem to do whatever it is, but if it could appear to other people that I'm doing something that I shouldn't do, or that I could be criticized, especially if I am perceived to be a Jewish person, and I will now be criticized not just as a person but as a member of the Jewish people. That we have to be very careful how it appears, how we appear in public to other people, and what it looks like, so that we don't lead people to think that we're doing terrible things. And because that is such a chilul Hashem, it's such a desecration of God's name when we Jewish people do something that is egregious and illegal and wrong, etc., that it can not only lead people astray, but it can lead people to think negatively of the Jewish people and thereby think negatively of God. So we have to be very careful to be above suspicion. And that was one of the things that Moses had in mind when he said to Gad and Reuven, you have to come to war because it appears that you don't want to be part of us. It appears that you don't care about the land of Israel. This beautiful land that is holy, that is elevated by God having a constant presence over the land, that he doesn't have that same eyes on other countries as he does on the land of Israel. And that is really something that we continue to think about in our day, about the holiness of the land of Israel, how the divine energy is focused always upon the land of Israel, that the land of Israel is always imbued with God's presence, that it has always an exalted state, and that it is a special privilege and a responsibility for us to protect it, for us to safeguard it, and for us to live in it. And we're in a day where we can. And actually the aliyah rate, the moving of Jews to Israel, is going up in our pandemic. You know, I might as well be in isolation in Israel than I'm going to be here. The aliyah rate in Israel is going out the roof, apparently, to Israel is going out the roof. So as much as this is a Jessup generation that really was a wise generation, they had God around them all the time, and they know the transition into the physical reality of living in the land of Israel is going to be hard. They have to win the battles, they have to fight it, they have to work the land, but know that God's with you. Know that it's a privilege to live in this land where God is sanctifying it and God's eyes are on it all the time. And so for Gad and Reuven to say, well, I really want to stay on the Transjordan, could be perceived as an affront to the whole journey that we've just been on. We've come so far. We've come 40 years now. We've been traveling through the desert. We're going to read about that in the second portion of this week's Torah portion, about the journeys we've been on, and we're poised to go into the land. And now we have these two tribes saying, maybe I don't want to go in, I want to stay here. The land's better over here. So again, they didn't go into the land and look at it and say, we want that, it's better land. They made a rash decision to choose that land first, but they also had their flocks in mind, perhaps first over everything else, over spirituality. So let's bring that lesson home and say, let's work on our spirituality, let's work on our connections, on our love, on our transcendent selves before we work on our physical selves. As you know, not that we let our physical selves go to pot, but that where's our focus? So what's really interesting, keep going with this idea. So we're going to, sorry, I lost that train of thought. But the Reuven and Gad are going to fight with the Jewish people. They're going to share the burden of fighting. They're going to share the burden of helping to conquer the land. And then what happens? And they're going to go to the front line. And they're sharing their fate with the Jewish people. So what happens? They go in and they conquer the land. And then 14 years later, they go back and they take the Transjordan. So another idea that we learn about actually in the second half of this week's Torah portion is this idea of an Ir Miklat. I'm going to bring it in now. An Ir Miklat is a city of refuge. So we talked about it before, it's come up before, but I'm going to reiterate it now because it's part of this week's Torah portion. Is that in the land of Israel and the Transjordan, there are cities called cities of refuge. If a person accidentally, unintentionally kills somebody, so they're responsible for having killed somebody, and the family have the right to kill you for killing their relative accidentally. So built into the system are these Ir Miklat, are these cities that you can run to, cities of refuge that you can go to. There are 6 cities of refuge. There are 3 in the land of Israel. The whole land of Israel has 3 cities of refuge, and the Transjordan also has 3. Very interesting. But we just learnt that there's 2.5. I don't really want to talk about that right now. It's too much to talk about. But the Gad, Reuven, and half of the tribe of Manasseh are in the Transjordan. So for 2.5 tribes, you have 3 cities of refuge, and in the whole rest of the land of Israel, you have 3 cities of refuge, meaning that it implies that there's more unintentional murders happening in the Transjordan. If they need 3 cities for 2.5 tribes, and for the rest of the tribes, you only need, which is 9.5 tribes in the mainland of Israel, you only need 3. You need 3 for that, and 3 for the 2.5 tribes. What's going on? So one of the answers given is that I have to give you another piece of information. So the Ir Miklat is a safe haven, and in this safe haven is where the unintentional murder runs to, and he is freed when the high priest, when the Kohen Gadol dies. That is when the priest. When that Kohen Gadol dies, that's when the unintentional murder is free to go, and there's no vengeance to be taken, no revenge. He's free, everything's absolved, start all over again. So you would think that the Kohen Gadol, what's the Kohen Gadol got to do with it? So the Kohen Gadol is somebody who represents all the people. He has to pray for all the people. He has to care about all the people, and perhaps the Kohen Gadol, who's stationed in Jerusalem. He's stationed in the center, the heartbeat of the land of Israel. So perhaps his effect, his praying for the Jewish people, his message is diluted outside the land of Israel, outside into the Transjordan. The effect of the prayer, again, the words of the Kohen Gadol have a greater effect in the land of Israel than they do outside. And so outside of the land of Israel, there's the potential for there to be more accidental murders than there would be in the land. That's one idea. And the other idea about the Ir Miklat and why there's 2.5, where there's 3 for the 2.5 tribes and 3 over here, is because of this idea that perhaps Gad and Reuben did have, as evidenced by their language, by saying we're going to take care of our flocks before we take care of our people, our children. We're going to take care of our flocks. And before they even went into the land, they say we want this land because it's good for our flocks. That there's a percentage for their materialism, for their livelihood. That's what they're more concerned about, that. And if that is even slightly more, you have more focus on your possessions, on your stuff, on acquisitions, then you're going to be less focused on your spirituality and working on yourself and becoming better and becoming more. And therefore, perhaps you'll need more cities of refuge because there'll perhaps be more accidental murderers in that environment where materialism is more important than spiritual. So that's an idea of the Ir Miklat. So anyway, back to Gad and Reuven. So Gad and Reuven, they wanted to live in the Transjordan, and they get the Transjordan. But it came after they approached Moses, and they came close to Moses, and they looked him in the eye, and they said, their intention was to be part of the Jewish people. They didn't want to absolve themselves of being part of the Jewish people. They wanted to be part of the Jewish people. And so they go into war, and they help divide up the land. And what's interesting is, as I mentioned, half the tribe of Manasseh is also stationed in Transjordan, and the other half is in the bulk of the land of Israel. So again, this is the glue that holds it together. So even if Gad and Reuven have perhaps slightly more materialistic tendencies, you have Manasseh who's going to glue it together. So we're never going to lose touch with that side of the Transjordan. And perhaps there was even an idea that we can expand the boundaries of the Promised Land. We can expand it out to include the Transjordan where Moses is. And therefore, on some level, perhaps maybe they had in mind that if we stay here and half the Manasseh is over here, that can on some level be considered part of the land of Israel, which Moses gets to be in and experience, even though he doesn't actually go into the mainland of Israel. So that's a sidebar comment. So anyway, so in this whole idea of Gad and Reuven going into the land, the idea of how it looks, that we can't be above suspicion, that we can't appear to be doing something that's wrong. We can't appear to be doing something not just because a desecration of God's name, because it might entice other people to do something because they see us doing it, they think it's fine to do, so they're going to do it too. So we have to be clean in the eyes of others and of God. Not just clean in the eyes of God, but also clean in the eyes of others. How important it is to be clean in the eyes of others. And that's a hard lesson, because sometimes we say, I have to stand up. We talked last week about Pinchas, who's going to stand up and he's going to spear these two people engaged in an immoral act and adulterous and so on. And yet, what are the people going to think? So sometimes you have to stand up, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to stand for the truth. Sometimes, it's a hard thing. But I guess the bar is, and however each situation has to be evaluated on its own, the bar is to be clean in the eyes of others and God. And sometimes it might be easier to be clean in the eyes of God than it is in the eyes of others, or vice versa. So clean. All right, so that's Gad and Reuven, and the idea of not rushing into a decision, being patient, and take into account the effect it will have on others. Okay, so that's Gad and Reuven. So what happens next is the next week's, the second Torah portion is called Masei, and it's about the journeys of the Jewish people. The journeys we went through the desert. It recapitulates, it goes over, it's a travelogue of the 42 stops that the Jewish people made along the way from coming out of Egypt until they arrived in the land of Israel. 42 journeys. And what's interesting is, as we know, it's 40 years. The first years, actually the first 16 months, there were 14 encampments. And the last year, there were 8 encampments. And so there were 22 encampments in the 38 years. So each step along the way was important. Each step upon the way is important. And there's so much in the commentaries about the journey of life, our journey through life, our journey through the desert, through the different places. And the names of these places are given because at each place we learned a lesson, at each place we grew, at each place we had a challenge, at each place there was something that we had to remember and something we had to know. And I think that the commentators speak about life as a journey, not a destination. Yes, we're going to end up in this destination when we leave this world, but life right now is a journey, and each step along the way is important, and each step has opportunities for growth and opportunities to acknowledge our journey and understand and change and move and grow, and to know God and to reach high bars and work on ourselves and use our speech well, and etc., etc. Go back to everything matters, life matters, words matter, and our journey matters. So don't be too flippant. Like, look back, even every day we're supposed to do a cheshvan hanefesh, like go over the day. Like, how did I do this day? What did I do this day? Did I say the right things? Did I go the right places? Did I, etc., etc. each day to evaluate so we can work on ourselves drip by drip by drip. The story of the rock that Rabbi Akiva saw. He saw a rock and he saw a water dripping onto this rock. And he saw that there was a groove that had been made in this rock. So interesting that these drips of onto the rock, a hard, very solid object, drip by drip by drip, creates a divot, whatever that's called, like whatever that's called, a hole, by the dripping, right? So Rabbi Akiva took that as an analogy. So every day on my journey, I'm growing. I might not see how far I've grown. I might not see that I have changed. But if I work on myself every day, drip by drip by drip by drip, I will have changed. If I study Torah every day, little bit, I will change. If I change my language every day, I will change. It's really about change. It's really about growth. It's about the journey of life. And yes, when we were in the desert, we had a miraculous journey, and it was God's kindness and things coming our way to teach us lessons, etc., etc. But so too in our lives, it's the same. Like, things happen in our lives, and we can talk about divine providence. We can talk about hashgacha pratit, how things happen, how we meet that person or we interact with that, or everybody has a story about how is it God or is it odd, right? Is it a coincidence, or is God there planting and helping our ways? In the morning blessings we say every morning, one of the blessings we say every morning, that you, God, makes firm the steps of man. You guide our journey. We are in our position in our families, with our children, with our parents, with our siblings, because these are the people that we need to become the righteous person that we made a vow in utero to become, right? It's the faith, the understanding is that everything we have is given to us as a gift to help us be the righteous person that we made that neder, that vow in utero that we would become. So yes, we might fight with our siblings, and we might fight with our parents, and we might fight with people, and yet there's lessons to learn. We might have terrible things happen to us, and tragedies and sicknesses and pandemics, and you name it. But it's a journey along the way. And it's so interesting, because I do think it speaks a little bit about the moment we're in. What can I learn in this moment? But it's also linking the past. Who am I? Where am I coming from? And it's also linking it to the future. Like, what am I putting into the future? These Jewish people, as they're entering the land, they're taking stock. We did these 42 journeys. Let's look back. What happened during those journeys? What did I do? What did I learn? Where did I go? I complained that there was no water. And then I understood that water can come out of a rock. and I complained to Moses, but then I understood really the water's coming from God, and I saw manna coming out of heaven, and I understood that God's going to come with me into the land of Israel, and I'm going to beat out the enemies, even though I'm a ragtag and I'm not like this strong army that's been practicing, and the same with the Jewish army in Israel. You can say that like my son was in the Israeli army, and he has so many stories to tell us about. Yes, they're this amazing army, but because God makes them into an amazing army. He was telling me about shooting practice, that in his unit there were like half the unit was shooting, and the other half of the unit was literally in a ditch with a pole, and at the top of the pole was a cutout of a man, and they would run up and down. Obviously, they were wearing helmets, and would run up and down this tunnel, whatever, like a mount. What's the word I'm looking for? A hole in the earth. They would run up and down this hole, like with their stick, with the cutout man, and then the other half of the unit would shoot at that, and then they'd switch. Like, you think this is the greatest army. This is an army that has fought off so many wars, that's kept Israel safe, that has done amazing, amazing things, because God's with it, because God's with us, that we're able to fight off the enemies, and that bombs can land, and they don't land most of the time. We have that we have the capacity to blow missiles out of the sky, etc., etc. There's so much to understand and to see that God's with us along the way. So the journeys, and so on one level, we left Egypt. We're leaving a place. We're leaving somewhere that's not good for us. We're leaving somewhere that's taking us down, and we're going somewhere. We're going into the land of Israel, and we're going somewhere good. We're going where God's eyes are on the land from all time, where there's an exalted state, where the presence of God is present. We're going. So there's a carrot to leave, and there's a stick to leave, and there's a carrot to run to. So we have both. And in our journeys, we have the same thing. We have things we avoid, and things that we want, and things that we want to leave behind. And it's all a journey. And can we take stock? So before we go in, we're learning. This is the end of the Journey in the Desert. Next week, we're going to begin a new book. We're going to speak about the book of Devarim. It's a recapitulation of everything that's happened. This is really the end of our journey. We're poised to go into the land of Israel. We have done this journey so far. We're about to go into the land. So we're going to go over the places that we went, understand, and Deuteronomy is a going over. Let's go over. Let's review. Okay, where did I go? Where did I come from? And not just at your eulogy. Let's do it like, okay, this happened in my life. This happened in my life. This happened. This good thing. This bad thing. This terrible thing. This sad thing. What did I learn? How did I move forward? What did I do with it? How did I integrate it? What did I speak about it? All of these things are really, really important. So travelogue, and what we learn along the way, and how much we're leaving a place in order to leave something that's negative, and how we're going to something positive, and we're going somewhere good. So all parts of our life shapes who we are and transforms us, and it's all part of our destiny. So I'm running very short on time, so I guess I have to end sadly, but let's just go over some of the things that we learned. So what we learned was the idea of words, and how important our words are, that they really matter, that they create something, that we create a change of status. We literally change the nature of an object. We literally change the nature of ourselves, that we literally change our brains by the words that we use, as exemplified by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who wouldn't use negative words, always positive words, always fill the world with positivity, put positivity out there. Even when you're feeling negative, maybe, find a positive word. I guess sometimes I'm also a believer of like crying and being down when you're down, but like keep moving. Okay, so the idea of words and how important words are, and the being able to beat out evil, kill the Midianites. The Midianites represent evil, taking away from God, idolatry, going in the away direction, and we want to be people who represent going towards God and for good and for holiness and for elevation. So we're going to beat out the Midianites, following on from last week's Torah portion, taking the spoils, what we do with the spoils, how we use those spoils, and we take the metals and the glass and we take them through a mikveh, and they become holy, and we elevate them and we use them for sacred things. So again, our mouth is sacred and our eating vessels are sacred. The idea of Reuven and Gad wanting to live on the Transjordan, how they were impatient, that they they didn't go into the land first, but they wanted to be part of the Jewish people, so they agree and they want to be part of the people going into the land, fighting the land, apportioning the land. Then they come back to the Transjordan. Their language showed that they valued their animals and their materialism more than their children, because it was worded in such a way that they were going to take care of the animals first. So let's switch that around. Let's not be people who are mostly focused on our materialism. We should be mostly focused on our spirituality and our working on ourselves and coming close to God and doing good in the world and being good. That's why we killed off the Midianites, to be good, to clear the way for us to do good and be good. So Reuben and Gad, and to be above reproach, so it doesn't look like we don't want to fight with the people, that we're going to live over here and we're going to let you do it without us, or that it might be perceived that. So we want to be clean in the eyes of others and of God. And then the idea of going into the land, settling the land, beating the land, and then we have the idea of, or the whole concept of journeys, life being a journey. Every single place along the way is something important, and this pandemic is part of our journey collectively. The world's journey includes this chapter, that includes this camping, this pandemic reality. Where will we be in 10 years? Who knows? But right now we'll look back, maybe we'll look back in 10 years and say, wasn't that an interesting step along the way, and what did I learn from that, and what did I grow from that, and how did I speak about that, and what did I think about that, and what did I do with that time? So every step along the way is part of the journey, not about the destination, it's about the journey. And then the idea of the Ir Meklat, that these sanctuaries where we can escape to. So what's interesting is there were 6, I'm going to end with this, there were 6 cities of refuge, physical spaces in time where an inadvertent murderer could run away and be safe. First of all, he takes his teacher with him, because without teaching, without learning, we die. So if we continue to live, you have to have a teacher. So that's one lesson. We have to have the Kohen Gadol. We want the Kohen Gadol. If you're the inadvertent murderer, maybe you want him to die so you can be free. So it was actually said that the mother of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest, would bring to these cities food and clothing to the inadvertent murderers, because she didn't want them to pray for the death of her son. So again, power of prayer. That the prayer of the Kohen Gadol, or the high priest, didn't stop these people from doing inadvertent murdering inadvertently. That the prayers that we say with our mouths are really important and have a value and have power. So that's the other idea. But I really wanted to end with 6 cities. And what's 6? And yes, it's a space in time, a space in place where we can be safe. But it also represents the 6 words of the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. 6 words of that stanza that speaks of God's unity. Listen up, Israel. God is one. There is nothing but God. And if you want to have a sanctuary in real time, it's God. So yes, we say sanctuaries in space, in these places you can have sanctuary, but also our commentators suggest that having this Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that really internalizing that is also a sanctuary that we can go to when we need to feel safe. So I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day.